The morning sun was shining through the tall windows of Providence Municipal Court. Judge Frank Caprio sat behind his wooden desk, looking at the list of cases for the day. He had been a judge for many years and thought he had seen everything. Traffic tickets, parking fines, small fights between neighbors. These were the usual things that came to his court. Frank was a kind man with gray hair and warm eyes. People in Providence loved him because he was fair but also understanding. He always tried to help people when he could. His court was different from other courts. It felt more like a place where people could talk about their problems instead of just getting punished. The bailiff, a tall man named Officer Martinez, stood near the door. He was holding a stack of papers with all the cases for the day. Frank could see there were about 20 cases to get through. Most of them would be quick and simple. Someone would come in, pay their fine, and leave. That was how most days went in his courtroom. "Are we ready to start?" Frank asked Officer Martinez. "Yes, Your Honor, we have the usual mix today. Some parking tickets, a few speeding cases, and one noise complaint," Martinez replied. Frank nodded and put on his reading glasses. The first few cases went just as he expected. A woman came in to pay a parking ticket. She said she was sorry and paid her fine. A man came in who had been caught speeding. He made excuses about being late for work, but he paid his fine too. Everything was normal and routine. The morning moved along slowly. Frank listened to each person's story, even when he had heard similar stories many times before. He believed everyone deserved to be heard. Sometimes he would reduce a fine if someone was having money problems. Sometimes he would give people extra time to pay. He always tried to be understanding. Around 10:30 in the morning, Officer Martinez looked at his list again. "Next case is ticket number 47823, he announced to the courtroom. Frank looked up from his papers and waited. Usually, when a case was called, an adult would walk up to stand in front of his desk. Sometimes it was a man in a business suit running late for work. Sometimes it was a woman with children waiting outside. Sometimes it was an older person who drove too slowly and got in trouble for blocking traffic. But this time was different. The door to the courtroom opened slowly. Frank looked up and saw something that made him stop and stare. A small boy was walking into his courtroom. The child looked to be about 12 years old. He was very thin and short. His clothes were too big for him. His jeans were rolled up at the bottom because they were too long. His shirt hung loose on his small frame. The boy was carrying a wrinkled envelope in his hand. He held it tightly like it was something very important. His shoes were old and worn out. Frank could see that they had holes in them. The boy's hair was messy, like he had been in a hurry and forgot to comb it. Everyone in the courtroom turned to look. The few people waiting for their own cases started whispering to each other. They had never seen a child come to court alone before. Officer Martinez looked confused too. He checked his papers again to make sure he had called the right case. The boy walked slowly toward Frank's desk. His steps were small and careful. Frank could see that the child was nervous. His hands were shaking a little bit. The boy kept looking around the big courtroom like he had never been in such a place before. Frank felt his heart start to beat faster. In all his years as a judge, he had never had a child come to his court alone. Children sometimes came with their parents, but they always sat in the back and waited. They never came up to talk to the judge by themselves. "Excuse me," Frank said gently. His voice was soft and kind. "Are you in the right place, son?" The boy stopped walking and looked up at Frank. His eyes were big and brown. Frank could see that the child was scared, but also determined. The boy cleared his throat and spoke in a quiet voice. "Yes, sir. I'm here for case number 47823. Frank looked at his papers again. Case 47823 was for parking tickets under the name Elena Rivera. Frank looked back at the small boy standing in front of him. "What's your name?" Frank asked. "Marcus Rivera, sir," the boy answered. "And where is Elena Rivera? Is she your mother?" Marcus nodded his head. "Yes, sir. She's my mom, but she couldn't come today." Frank leaned forward in his chair. This was very unusual. Adults were supposed to come to court themselves or send a lawyer. Children were not allowed to represent other people in court. Frank wasn't sure what to do. "Son, your mother needs to come to court herself. You can't handle her case for her," Frank explained patiently. Marcus's eyes filled with tears, but he didn't cry. He held the envelope tighter in his small hands. "Please, sir, she really can't come. She tried, but she just can't. I have the money to pay the tickets right here." Frank felt something strange in his chest. This brave little boy had come to court all by himself to help his mother. Frank had never seen anything like it. He could tell this was going to be a day he would never forget. Judge Frank Caprio looked down at the small boy standing in front of his desk. Marcus Rivera was so young and thin that Frank felt worried about him. The judge had children and grandchildren of his own, and he knew that 12-year-old boys should be playing games or doing homework, not standing alone in a courtroom. "Marcus," Frank said gently, "why don't you tell me why your mother couldn't come today?" Marcus shifted from one foot to the other. He was still holding the wrinkled envelope tightly. Frank could see that the boy was thinking carefully about what to say. Finally, Marcus took a deep breath and began to speak. "My mom works 3 jobs, sir. She works every day, even on weekends. She wanted to come, but she was scared she would lose her jobs if she took time off." Frank nodded slowly. He had heard this story before from other people who came to his court. Many people in Providence worked very hard just to pay for basic things like food and rent, but he had never had a child explain this to him. "What kind of jobs does your mother do?" Frank asked. Marcus's voice got a little stronger as he talked about his mother. Frank could hear the love and respect in the boy's voice. "She cleans offices at night, sir. She goes to work at 10 o'clock at night and comes home at 6 in the morning. Then she sleeps for a few hours and goes to work at a restaurant called Rosie's Diner. She serves food there from 11 in the morning until 6 at night." Frank was listening carefully. 2 jobs was already a lot of work for one person. But Marcus had said his mother worked 3 jobs. "You said 3 jobs, Marcus. What's the third one?" "On weekends, she does laundry for people in our neighborhood. She picks up dirty clothes on Saturday morning and brings them back clean on Sunday night. She uses the washing machines in the basement of our apartment building." Frank felt his heart get heavy as he listened to this story. This woman was working almost every hour of every day just to survive. He had seen many hardworking people in his court, but this sounded like one of the most difficult situations he had ever heard about. "That sounds like very hard work," Frank said softly. Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir. My mom is always tired, but she says we have to work hard to pay for our apartment and food. She doesn't want us to be homeless." The word homeless hit Frank like a punch. He realized that this family was living right on the edge. If Marcus's mother lost even one of her jobs, they might not have enough money to survive. "Marcus, how did your mother get these parking tickets?" Frank asked. Marcus looked down at his shoes. Frank could see that this part of the story was hard for him to talk about. "She got them when she was picking me up from school," Marcus said quietly. "Picking you up from school?" Frank repeated. "Don't you take the school bus home?" Marcus shook his head. "No, sir. My mom comes to get me every day at 3 o'clock, but sometimes she's running late from her job at the diner. The legal parking spots near the school are always full, and they're far away from the school door. So she parks in the no parking zone right in front of the school." Frank was starting to understand. Marcus's mother was getting parking tickets because she was trying to pick up her son quickly and get back to work. "Why doesn't she just let you walk home by yourself? You seem like a smart, responsible boy." Marcus's face changed. Frank could see pain in the child's eyes. "There are some bigger kids at school who bother me sometimes. My mom is scared something bad will happen if I walk home alone. She says she needs to be there to make sure I'm safe." Frank felt his chest tighten. This mother was getting parking tickets because she was protecting her son from bullies. She was breaking parking rules because she loved her child and wanted to keep him safe. "How many parking tickets does your mother have?" Frank asked. Marcus opened the wrinkled envelope and pulled out several pieces of paper. His small hands were shaking as he counted them. 6 tickets, sir. They're all from the same place, right in front of Roosevelt Elementary School." Frank looked at the tickets Marcus handed to him. Each ticket was for $50. 6 tickets meant Marcus's mother owed $300 to the city. For a family that was already struggling to pay rent and buy food, $300 might as well have been $3,000, Marcus. "Did your mother know that parking in that spot would get her tickets?" "Yes, sir," Marcus said honestly. "She knew it was wrong, but she said sometimes parents have to choose between following rules and keeping their children safe. She chose to keep me safe." Frank felt tears starting to form in his eyes. He had been a judge for many years and he had heard many sad stories. But there was something about this 12-year-old boy standing in his courtroom, defending his mother's choices, that touched his heart in a way he had never felt before. "Your mother sounds like a very good person, Marcus." "She is, sir. She's the best mom in the world. She never complains about working so hard. She always makes sure I have food to eat and clean clothes to wear. She helps me with my homework even when she's so tired she can barely keep her eyes open." Frank could hear the love in Marcus's voice. This boy understood how much his mother was sacrificing for him. That was rare for a child so young. "So your mother sent you here to pay these tickets?" Frank asked. Marcus shook his head quickly. "No, sir. She doesn't know I'm here. She thinks I'm at school." Frank felt shocked. "You skipped school to come here?" "Yes, sir. I told my teacher I had a doctor's appointment. My mom was crying about the tickets last night. She said we might have to move to a cheaper apartment. But all the cheap apartments are in bad neighborhoods. I didn't want her to worry anymore, so I decided to come pay the tickets myself." Judge Frank Caprio stared at Marcus Rivera in complete amazement. This 12-year-old boy had skipped school and traveled across the city alone to pay his mother's parking tickets. Frank had never seen such courage and love from someone so young. "Marcus," Frank said carefully, "how did you get here today? Did someone drive you?" "No, sir. I took 2 buses. I had to ask people for directions because I've never been downtown before. It took me almost 2 hours to get here." Frank felt his heart skip a beat. A small child had traveled alone through the city on public transportation just to help his mother. Frank looked at Officer Martinez, who was also staring at Marcus with surprise and respect. "Weren't you scared to travel alone?" Frank asked. Marcus shrugged his small shoulders. "A little bit, sir. But I was more scared about my mom losing her jobs. She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep. I hear her in the kitchen worrying about money. I didn't want her to worry about these tickets too." Frank leaned forward in his chair. He wanted to understand the situation completely before he made any decisions. "Marcus, tell me more about these kids who bother you at school. What exactly do they do?" Marcus looked uncomfortable. Frank could see that the boy didn't like talking about this part of his life. "There are 3 boys in the grade above me. They're bigger and stronger than me. They wait for me after school sometimes." "What do they do when they find you?" Frank asked gently. "They push me around. They take my lunch money sometimes. Last month, one of them pushed me so hard that I fell and scraped my knee really bad. My mom saw the blood on my pants when she picked me up." Frank felt anger starting to build inside him. These bullies were hurting this sweet, innocent child. No wonder his mother was desperate to pick him up from school every day. "Did you tell your teacher about these boys?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir. My teacher talked to them, but it only made things worse. Now they're even more angry at me. They said they would hurt me worse if I told on them again." Frank understood now. The school wasn't able to protect Marcus from these bullies. His mother knew that her small, gentle son was in danger every day. She was willing to get parking tickets and pay fines just to make sure he got home safely. "So your mother parks illegally because she's trying to get to you as quickly as possible?" "Yes, sir. She has to run from the diner, drive to my school, pick me up, and then drive me home before she goes back to work. If she parks in the legal spots, she has to walk 3 blocks to get to the school door. By the time she walks there and back, she might be late getting back to her job." Frank was starting to see the whole picture. This wasn't just about parking tickets. This was about a mother who was trapped between protecting her son and following the law. She couldn't let her child walk home alone because he would get hurt. But she also couldn't afford to lose her job by being late. "Has your mother ever been late getting back to work because of the parking situation?" "Yes, sir. A few times. Her boss at the diner got really mad. He said if she's late again, he'll fire her. That job pays for our food. If she loses it, we won't have enough money to eat." Frank felt sick to his stomach. This family was living in an impossible situation. A loving mother was forced to choose between her son's safety and following parking laws. There was no good choice for her to make. "Marcus, you said your mother was crying about these tickets last night. What exactly did she say?" Marcus's eyes filled with tears, but he tried to be strong. "She was looking at all the tickets on our kitchen table. She was adding up how much money she owes. She said we might have to move to a cheaper place, but she was scared about moving to a bad neighborhood where it might be even more dangerous for me." Frank felt his throat get tight. This woman was worried that paying the parking tickets would force them to move somewhere even worse for her son. Did she say anything else? She said maybe she should try to find a different job, one where she could pick me up without getting tickets. But all her jobs are already part-time, and she needs all 3 of them to pay our bills. She doesn't know what to do. Frank looked down at the 6 parking tickets on his desk. Each ticket represented a day when a loving mother chose to protect her child, instead of following the law. Each ticket was proof of a mother's love and desperation. "Marcus, I need to ask you something very important. Are you telling me the truth about everything? About the bullies, about your mother's jobs, about why she parks illegally?" Marcus looked straight into Frank's eyes. Yes, sir. I promise I'm telling the truth. I would never lie about my mom. She's a good person who works harder than anyone I know. Frank believed him. He had been a judge long enough to know when someone was telling the truth. Marcus's story was too detailed and too painful to be made up. Besides, what 12-year-old would skip school and travel across the city alone just to tell lies? Your mother doesn't know you're here today? No, sir. She would be very upset if she knew I skipped school, but I heard her crying last night and I couldn't stand it anymore. She does everything for me and I wanted to do something for her. Frank felt tears in his eyes. This child loved his mother so much that he was willing to get in trouble just to help her. Marcus was showing more courage and maturity than many adults who came to Frank's courtroom. Marcus, you are a very brave and loving son. Your mother is lucky to have you. Thank you, sir, but I'm the lucky one. My mom gave up everything to take care of me. She could have had an easier life if she didn't have me to worry about. Frank's heart broke a little more. This child actually thought he was a burden to his mother. He didn't understand that he was probably the reason his mother worked so hard and stayed strong. Frank looked around his courtroom. Everyone was listening to Marcus's story with tears in their eyes. Officer Martinez was wiping his face with a tissue. Even the court reporter had stopped typing and was just staring at this incredible little boy. Frank knew this was not going to be an ordinary case. This was something special, something that would change everyone who heard it. Judge Frank Caprio watched as Marcus Rivera reached into his pocket with his small hand. The boy pulled out the wrinkled envelope he had been holding so tightly. Frank could see that Marcus's hands were shaking as he opened it. "Marcus, what do you have there?" Frank asked softly. "The money to pay my mom's tickets, sir," Marcus replied. Frank looked at the envelope. It was old and worn like it had been handled many times. There was writing on the outside in a child's handwriting. Frank could make out the words "for mom" written in pencil. Marcus opened the envelope carefully like it contained something very precious. He turned it upside down and poured the contents onto the desk in front of Frank. Everyone in the courtroom watched in silence. Out of the envelope came crumpled dollar bills. Quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies. There were many coins and some small bills. Frank could see that most of the money was made up of coins. It looked like the kind of money a child would collect over a long time. Marcus began to count the money very carefully. His fingers moved slowly as he separated the bills from the coins. Frank watched as the boy made neat little piles of each type of coin. There were a lot of quarters and dimes, but also many pennies, $1, $2, $3. Marcus counted quietly. Frank found himself holding his breath as he watched this small boy count every penny. The other people in the courtroom were completely silent. Everyone was watching Marcus count his money. As Marcus continued counting, Frank noticed something. Many of the bills were very old and wrinkled. Some of the coins were dirty, like they had been found on the ground. This wasn't money that had been given to Marcus by his mother. This was money the boy had collected himself. $47, $48, Marcus continued. Frank's eyes filled with tears as he realized what he was seeing. This child had somehow saved almost $50 in coins and small bills. That was a lot of money for a 12-year-old boy, especially one whose family struggled to pay for food. Marcus finished counting the bills and started on the coins. He made separate piles for quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies. Frank watched as the piles grew bigger and bigger. There were so many coins that they covered a large part of his desk. "Where did you get all this money, Marcus?" Frank asked. Marcus looked up from his counting. "I saved it, sir. It took me a long time. How did you save it?" Marcus went back to counting his coins, but he answered Frank's question at the same time. "I stopped eating lunch at school. Instead of buying lunch, I kept the lunch money my mom gave me. That was $3 every day." Frank felt his heart sink. This child had been skipping meals to save money. "Marcus, you need to eat lunch. Growing boys need food, I know, sir, but I wasn't that hungry. And I knew my mom needed help more than I needed lunch." Frank wanted to cry. This boy had been going hungry at school to save money for his mother. "What else did you do to get this money?" "I collected bottles and cans from trash cans around our neighborhood. You can return them to the store and get 5 cents for each one. It takes a lot of bottles to make $1, but I had time after school." Frank imagined this small boy walking around his neighborhood, looking through trash cans for bottles and cans. He probably had to walk for hours just to collect enough bottles to make a few dollars. "Did you do anything else?" "Yes, sir. I helped Mrs. Patterson next door carry her groceries up the stairs." She's old and her knees hurt. She gave me 50 cents every time I helped her. And I helped Mr. Johnson wash his car on weekends. He gave me $2 each time. Marcus finished counting the coins. He looked up at Frank with pride in his eyes. $150 exactly, sir. That's enough to pay all of my mom's tickets. Frank stared at the money on his desk. $150 in small bills and coins. This represented months of sacrifice from a 12-year-old boy. Months of skipped lunches, hours of collecting bottles, weekends of helping neighbors. Marcus, how long did it take you to save this money? About 4 months, sir. I started saving right after Christmas. What were you saving it for originally? Marcus looked down at his shoes. Frank could see that this question made him sad. My mom's birthday is next month. I wanted to buy her something really nice. She never buys anything for herself. She always says we need to save money for important things. I thought maybe I could buy her a pretty dress or some nice perfume. Frank felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. This child had been saving for months to buy his mother a birthday present. He had gone without lunch and worked hard to save every penny. And now he was giving it all up to pay her parking tickets. So you're giving up your mother's birthday present to pay these tickets? Marcus nodded. Yes, sir. I saw her crying last night about the tickets. I realized that helping her with this problem was more important than buying her a present. She'll be happier if she doesn't have to worry about owing money. Frank looked around his courtroom. Officer Martinez was wiping tears from his eyes. The court reporter had completely stopped typing and was just staring at Marcus with amazement. Even the few people waiting for their own cases were crying. Marcus, does your mother know you saved this money? No, sir. I hid it in my room. I wanted to surprise her on her birthday. But last night I decided that helping her now was better than waiting for her birthday. Frank looked at the pile of money on his desk. Each coin represented a lunch that Marcus had skipped. Each dollar bill represented hours of collecting bottles or helping neighbors. This wasn't just money. This was a 12-year-old boy's love for his mother, turned into coins and bills. Marcus, you are the most generous and loving child I have ever met. Your mother would be so proud of you. Thank you, sir. I just want her to stop crying. She works so hard and she never complains. She deserves to be happy. Frank stood up from his chair. He walked around his desk and knelt down next to Marcus so they were the same height. He looked into the boy's eyes. Marcus, I want you to know that what you've done here today is extraordinary. You've shown more love and sacrifice than most adults ever show in their whole lives. Marcus smiled a little. I learned it from my mom, sir. She sacrifices for me every day. Frank felt his voice getting shaky. You're right, son. And today you're sacrificing for her. Judge Frank Caprio watched as Marcus Rivera reached into his pocket with his small hand. The boy pulled out the wrinkled envelope he had been holding so tightly. Frank could see that Marcus's hands were shaking as he opened it. Marcus, what do you have there? Frank asked softly. The money to pay my mom's tickets, sir, Marcus replied. Frank looked at the envelope. It was old and worn like it had been handled many times. There was writing on the outside in a child's handwriting. Frank could make out the words for mom, written in pencil. Marcus opened the envelope carefully like it contained something very precious. He turned it upside down and poured the contents onto the desk in front of Frank. Everyone in the courtroom watched in silence. Out of the envelope came crumpled dollar bills. Quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies. There were many coins and some small bills. Frank could see that most of the money was made up of coins. It looked like the kind of money a child would collect over a long time. Marcus began to count the money very carefully. His fingers moved slowly as he separated the bills from the coins. Frank watched as the boy made neat little piles of each type of coin. There were a lot of quarters and dimes, but also many pennies, $1, $2, $3. Marcus counted quietly. Frank found himself holding his breath as he watched this small boy count every penny. The other people in the courtroom were completely silent. Everyone was watching Marcus count his money. As Marcus continued counting, Frank noticed something. Many of the bills were very old and wrinkled. Some of the coins were dirty, like they had been found on the ground. This wasn't money that had been given to Marcus by his mother. This was money the boy had collected himself. $47, $48, Marcus continued. Frank's eyes filled with tears as he realized what he was seeing. This child had somehow saved almost $50 in coins and small bills. That was a lot of money for a 12-year-old boy, especially one whose family struggled to pay for food. Marcus finished counting the bills and started on the coins. He made separate piles for quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies. Frank watched as the piles grew bigger and bigger. There were so many coins that they covered a large part of his desk. "Where did you get all this money, Marcus?" Frank asked. Marcus looked up from his counting. "I saved it, sir. It took me a long time." "How did you save it?" Marcus went back to counting his coins, but he answered Frank's question at the same time. "I stopped eating lunch at school. Instead of buying lunch, I kept the lunch money my mom gave me. That was $3 every day." Frank felt his heart sink. This child had been skipping meals to save money. "Marcus, you need to eat lunch. Growing boys need food, I know, sir, but I wasn't that hungry. And I knew my mom needed help more than I needed lunch." Frank wanted to cry. This boy had been going hungry at school to save money for his mother. "What else did you do to get this money?" "I collected bottles and cans from trash cans around our neighborhood. You can return them to the store and get 5 cents for each one. It takes a lot of bottles to make $1, but I had time after school." Frank imagined this small boy walking around his neighborhood, looking through trash cans for bottles and cans. He probably had to walk for hours just to collect enough bottles to make a few dollars. "Did you do anything else?" "Yes, sir. I helped Mrs. Patterson next door carry her groceries up the stairs. She's old and her knees hurt. She gave me 50 cents every time I helped her. And I helped Mr. Johnson wash his car on weekends. He gave me $2 each time." Marcus finished counting the coins. He looked up at Frank with pride in his eyes. $150 exactly, sir. That's enough to pay all of my mom's tickets." Frank stared at the money on his desk. $150 in small bills and coins. This represented months of sacrifice from a 12-year-old boy. Months of skipped lunches, hours of collecting bottles, weekends of helping neighbors. "Marcus, how long did it take you to save this money?" "About 4 months, sir. I started saving right after Christmas." "What were you saving it for originally?" Marcus looked down at his shoes. Frank could see that this question made him sad. "My mom's birthday is next month. I wanted to buy her something really nice. She never buys anything for herself. She always says we need to save money for important things. I thought maybe I could buy her a pretty dress or some nice perfume." Frank felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. This child had been saving for months to buy his mother a birthday present. He had gone without lunch and worked hard to save every penny. And now he was giving it all up to pay her parking tickets. "So you're giving up your mother's birthday present to pay these tickets?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir. I saw her crying last night about the tickets. I realized that helping her with this problem was more important than buying her a present. She'll be happier if she doesn't have to worry about owing money." Frank looked around his courtroom. Officer Martinez was wiping tears from his eyes. The court reporter had completely stopped typing and was just staring at Marcus with amazement. Even the few people waiting for their own cases were crying. "Marcus, does your mother know you saved this money?" "No, sir. I hid it in my room. I wanted to surprise her on her birthday. But last night I decided that helping her now was better than waiting for her birthday." Frank looked at the pile of money on his desk. Each coin represented a lunch that Marcus had skipped. Each dollar bill represented hours of collecting bottles or helping neighbors. This wasn't just money. This was a 12-year-old boy's love for his mother, turned into coins and bills. "Marcus, you are the most generous and loving child I have ever met. Your mother would be so proud of you." "Thank you, sir. I just want her to stop crying. She works so hard and she never complains. She deserves to be happy." Frank stood up from his chair. He walked around his desk and knelt down next to Marcus so they were the same height. He looked into the boy's eyes. "Marcus, I want you to know that what you've done here today is extraordinary. You've shown more love and sacrifice than most adults ever show in their whole lives." Marcus smiled a little. "I learned it from my mom, sir. She sacrifices for me every day." Frank felt his voice getting shaky. "You're right, son. And today you're sacrificing for her." Judge Frank Caprio sat in his chair for a long moment looking at Marcus Rivera. The 12-year-old boy stood patiently, waiting for Frank's decision. The pile of money on Frank's desk seemed to shine under the courtroom lights. Everyone in the room was holding their breath. Suddenly, Frank did something that shocked everyone present. He stood up from his chair and walked around his big wooden desk. He had never done this before in all his years as a judge. Judges were supposed to stay behind their desks looking down at the people who came before them. But this situation was different from anything Frank had ever experienced. Frank walked over to where Marcus was standing and knelt down on one knee. Now he and Marcus were the same height, looking directly into each other's eyes. Marcus seemed surprised but not scared. Frank's voice was gentle and warm. "Marcus, I want you to put your money back in that envelope." Marcus looked confused. "But sir, I need to pay my mom's tickets." "I know you do, son, but I'm not going to take your money." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "Please, sir. I have enough money." I counted it 3 times to make sure. Frank reached out and put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Marcus, I'm not taking your money because I'm dismissing all of your mother's parking tickets. She doesn't owe the city anything." The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Officer Martinez smiled and nodded his head in approval. The court reporter wiped tears from her eyes. The people waiting for their own cases began to clap softly. Marcus stared at Frank with his mouth open. "You mean my mom doesn't have to pay the tickets?" "That's exactly what I mean. Your mother was protecting you from bullies. She was being a good mother. The city doesn't need her money more than you and your mother need food and a safe place to live." Marcus began to cry. These weren't sad tears anymore. They were tears of relief and joy. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. My mom is going to be so happy." But Frank wasn't finished. He had been thinking about Marcus's story while the boy counted his money. A 12-year-old who skipped lunch to save money. A child who collected bottles and cans to help his family. A boy who loved to read but didn't have books at home. "Marcus, I want to ask you something. You said you like to read, but you don't have many books at home?" "Yes, sir. We have a few books, but my mom can't afford to buy new ones." "Books cost a lot of money," Frank smiled. "What if I told you that some people in this city might want to help you get more books?" Marcus looked puzzled. "I don't understand, sir." "Well, when people hear your story, they're going to be very impressed with you. You've shown more courage and love than most adults. I think people are going to want to help you." Frank stood up and walked back behind his desk. But he didn't sit down. Instead, he picked up his phone and made a call while everyone watched. "Hello, Sarah? This is Judge Caprio. I have a very special young man here in my courtroom, and I think the people of Providence would like to know about him." Frank was calling Sarah Martinez, a reporter for the local newspaper. Frank had known Sarah for many years, and he knew she wrote stories that helped people in the community. "Sarah, I want you to come down to the courthouse when you have time. I have a story that will touch your heart and make you proud to live in Providence." After Frank hung up the phone, he looked at Marcus again. "Marcus, how would you feel about meeting some people who might want to help you and your mother?" "What kind of help, sir?" "Well, maybe someone has books they could give you. Maybe someone knows about a job for your mother that would pay better than her 3 jobs. Maybe someone can help make sure those bullies at school leave you alone." Marcus's eyes got wide. "Really? People would want to help us?" "Marcus, when people hear about what you did today, they're going to see what I see. They're going to see a brave, loving, generous boy who deserves good things in life." Officer Martinez walked over to Frank's desk. "Your Honor, if I may say something?" Frank nodded. "Of course, Officer Martinez. I've been working in this courthouse for 10 years. I've never seen anything like what this young man did today. If you don't mind, I'd like to help spread his story too. I think my church would be very interested in helping this family." Frank smiled. "That's a wonderful idea, Officer Martinez." Marcus looked back and forth between Frank and Officer Martinez. "I don't understand why everyone wants to help us. We're just regular people." Frank knelt down next to Marcus again. "Son, you're not regular people. You and your mother are extraordinary people. Your mother works 3 jobs to take care of you. She risks getting tickets to keep you safe from bullies, and you saved money for 4 months to help her even though it meant you went hungry. But that's just what families do, sir. We take care of each other." Frank felt his throat get tight with emotion. "Marcus, not all families take care of each other the way you and your mother do. What you have is special. It's beautiful. And when people see something beautiful like that, they want to help make it even better." Marcus put his money back in the envelope, just as Frank had told him to do. But now the envelope meant something different. It wasn't money to pay tickets anymore. It was money that Marcus could use for something good, something that would make him happy. "Marcus, what are you going to do with your money now?" Marcus thought for a moment. "I still want to buy my mom a birthday present, sir. She deserves something nice." Frank smiled. "I think that's a perfect idea. And I think your mother is going to cry happy tears when you give her that present, especially when you tell her how you saved the money. Should I tell her I came here today?" Frank thought about this carefully. "That's up to you, son. But I think your mother would be proud to know that her son was brave enough to come here and try to help her." Marcus nodded. "I'll tell her. I don't want to keep secrets from her. Frank looked around his courtroom one more time. This had started as an ordinary day with ordinary cases, but Marcus Rivera had turned it into something extraordinary. Frank knew that this story would spread beyond his courtroom. It would touch hearts all over Providence and maybe even beyond. Judge Frank Caprio stood looking down at Marcus Rivera and felt his heart breaking. In all his years as a judge, he had never faced a situation like this. The law was clear about parking tickets. People who parked illegally had to pay fines. It didn't matter why they broke the law. Rules were rules, but this case was different. This wasn't about someone who parked illegally because they were lazy or didn't care about the law. This was about a mother who was trying to protect her son from bullies. And now her 12-year-old child was standing in his courtroom, offering his life savings to pay for his mother's mistakes. Frank walked back to his chair and sat down. He looked at the pile of money on his desk, $150 in coins and small bills, money that a child had saved by going without lunch and working after school. Money that was supposed to buy a birthday present for his mother. The courtroom was completely quiet. Everyone was waiting to see what Frank would do. Officer Martinez was standing by the door, but Frank could see that he was affected by Marcus's story too. The court reporter had her hands on her keyboard, but she wasn't typing. She was just watching Frank and Marcus. Frank picked up the 6 parking tickets and looked at them again. Each ticket was for $50. The total fine was $300, but Marcus only had $150. Even if Frank accepted the boy's money, it wouldn't be enough to pay all the tickets. Frank had several choices. He could accept Marcus's money and tell him he needed to bring more money to pay the rest. He could refuse to take the money and tell Marcus that his mother had to come to court herself. He could dismiss the case completely and forget about the tickets. Or he could do something else entirely. Each choice had problems. If he took Marcus's money but asked for more, the boy would probably try to save more money by skipping more meals. If he refused to take the money, Marcus would go home feeling like he had failed to help his mother. If he dismissed the case, other people might think he was being unfair. But Frank wasn't just thinking about the law. He was thinking about Marcus and his mother. He was thinking about a woman who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't make enough money to live comfortably. He was thinking about a child who was being bullied at school and had a mother who loved him enough to risk getting tickets to keep him safe. Frank had been a judge for 25 years. He had seen thousands of people come through his courtroom. Most of them were good people who had made mistakes or found themselves in difficult situations. Frank always tried to be fair, but he also tried to be understanding. Some judges believed that the law was the law no matter what. They thought that showing mercy or understanding would make the legal system weak. But Frank believed that sometimes the most important part of justice was understanding why people did what they did. Frank looked at Marcus, who was standing patiently in front of his desk. The boy's clothes were still too big for him. His shoes still had holes. His hair was still messy. But there was something about Marcus that made him seem older than 12. Maybe it was the way he had traveled across the city alone. Maybe it was the way he spoke about his mother with so much love and respect. Maybe it was the way he was willing to give up his own happiness to help someone else. "Marcus," Frank said gently, "I need to ask you something important. Do you think your mother would want you to skip lunch to save money?" Marcus thought for a moment before answering. "No, sir. If she knew I wasn't eating lunch, she would be very upset. She always makes sure I eat breakfast before school, and she asks me about lunch when I get home." "What do you tell her when she asks about lunch?" "I tell her it was good. I don't want her to know I'm not eating. She would worry about me, and she already worries about too many things." Frank nodded. "And do you think she would want you to spend hours collecting bottles and cans instead of playing with friends or doing fun things that kids your age should do?" Marcus looked confused by the question. "Sir, I don't really have friends. The kids at school either ignore me or bully me. Collecting bottles gave me something to do after school, and it felt good to know I was earning money to help my mom." Frank felt another wave of sadness wash over him. This child didn't even have friends to play with. He spent his free time working to help his family survive. "Marcus, what do you want to be when you grow up?" The question seemed to surprise Marcus. "I want to be a teacher, sir. I love to read, and I think it would be nice to help other kids learn things. My mom says education is the most important thing, and that if I study hard, I can have a better life than she has." "Do you like to read?" "Yes, sir. I love reading. But we don't have many books at home. Sometimes I go to the library after school before I collect bottles. They have so many books there. I could spend all day reading if I had time. Frank smiled for the first time since Marcus had entered his courtroom. What's your favorite kind of book? I like stories about kids who go on adventures and solve problems. I also like books about real people who did important things to help others. My teacher says those are called biographies. Frank was impressed. This 12-year-old boy had goals and dreams. He wanted to be a teacher. He loved to read. He cared about helping others. Despite all the difficult things in his life, Marcus was still a child with hopes for the future. Frank looked at the money on his desk again. Then he looked at Marcus. Then he looked around his courtroom at all the people who were watching and waiting to see what he would do. Frank had made thousands of decisions in his courtroom over the years. Some were easy decisions that followed the law exactly. Some were harder decisions that required him to balance the law with mercy and understanding. But this decision felt like the most important one he had ever faced. This wasn't just about parking tickets anymore. This was about a family that was struggling to survive. This was about a mother's love for her son and a son's love for his mother. This was about a child who had shown more courage and generosity than many adults. Frank knew that whatever he decided would affect Marcus and his mother for a long time. It would also affect everyone else in the courtroom who had witnessed this incredible story. And it would affect Frank himself, because he knew he would remember this day for the rest of his life. 6 months had passed since Marcus Rivera first walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom. It was a warm spring day in Providence, and Marcus was walking up the steps of the courthouse once again. But this time, everything was different. Marcus was no longer wearing clothes that were too big for him. Elena had been able to buy him new clothes that fit properly with the money she earned from her new job at Ricci's family restaurant. His old shoes with holes had been replaced with sturdy new sneakers. His hair was neatly combed, and he was carrying a backpack full of books. More importantly, Marcus was not alone and scared this time. Elena Rivera walked beside her son, holding his hand. She was wearing a pretty blue dress that Marcus had bought her for her birthday with the money he had saved. Her face was bright and happy, without the worry lines that had been there 6 months ago. Judge Caprio was expecting them this time. He had invited Marcus and Elena to come back so Marcus could tell him how things were going. When they entered the courtroom, Frank smiled broadly. "Marcus, Elena, it's so wonderful to see you both." Marcus walked up to Judge Caprio's desk with confidence. He was no longer the frightened little boy who had stood there months ago. He stood up straight and looked Judge Caprio in the eyes. "Hello, Judge Caprio. Thank you for asking us to come back." Elena stepped forward too. "Judge Caprio, I can never thank you enough for what you did for us. You changed our whole lives." Frank gestured for them to sit in the chairs in front of his desk. This was much more comfortable than their first meeting. "Marcus, tell me how school is going." Marcus's face lit up. "It's going really well, sir. I'm getting A's in all my subjects. And guess what? I'm not getting bullied anymore, and that's wonderful. What happened with those boys who were bothering you?" "Well, after Mrs. Santos started the new anti-bullying program, they had to apologize to me in front of the whole school. At first I thought that would make them even more angry. But something strange happened. One of them, Tommy Rodriguez, actually became my friend." Frank raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Really? How did that happen?" "Tommy came up to me a few weeks after the assembly. He said he was sorry for being mean to me. He said his older brother used to bully him at home, so he thought that's how boys were supposed to act. But when he heard my story, he realized that bullying was wrong." Elena smiled proudly at her son. "Now Tommy comes to our apartment sometimes to do homework with Marcus. He's a good boy who just needed someone to show him a better way." "And what about the other bullies?" Frank asked. "They mostly just ignore me now, which is fine with me," Marcus said. "But Tommy and I started a club at school called Kids Helping Kids. We help younger children who are having problems with bullies." Frank was impressed. "So you took your bad experience and used it to help other children?" "Yes, sir. Tommy and I figured that if we had someone to help us when we were scared, maybe we could be that help for other kids." Frank turned to Elena. "And how are things going with your new job, Elena?" Elena's eyes filled with happy tears. "Judge Caprio, Mr. Ricci has been like an angel to us. I work at his restaurant from 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday. I make more money in one job than I used to make in 3 jobs, And I have health insurance now, so I don't have to worry about what would happen if Marcus or I got sick. That's wonderful news. What do you do with all your extra time? I can be home when Marcus gets out of school. I can help him with his homework. I can cook dinner for us every night instead of just on weekends. For the first time in years, I feel like I can actually be a good mother instead of just a working mother. Marcus reached over and took his mother's hand. You were always a good mother, Mama. You just didn't have time to rest. Frank felt his heart warm as he watched this mother and son. They had been through so much, but their love for each other had never changed. Marcus, are you still collecting books? Marcus laughed. Judge Caprio, I have so many books now that we had to buy a bookshelf for my room. Mrs. Coleman from the bookstore brings me new books every month, and the library gave me my own special library card that lets me check out as many books as I want. What's your favorite book that you've read recently? I just finished reading a biography of Thurgood Marshall. He was the first African-American Supreme Court justice. He spent his life fighting for fairness and justice for all people, especially people who were being treated badly because of their skin color. Frank nodded approvingly. That's an excellent choice. What did you learn from his story? Marcus thought carefully before answering. I learned that sometimes one person can make a big difference in the world. Justice Marshall helped change unfair laws by never giving up, even when things seemed impossible. It made me think about what I want to do when I grow up. Do you still want to be a teacher? Yes, sir. But now I think I might want to be a special kind of teacher. I want to teach kids who are having hard times, kids whose families don't have much money or who are getting bullied. I want to show them that they can still have good lives and achieve their dreams. Elena squeezed Marcus's hand. The scholarship fund from the library is growing. They've raised enough money to pay for Marcus's college education and help 3 other children too. Frank was amazed. That's incredible. Your story is still inspiring people. Actually, Judge Caprio, that's part of why I wanted to come back today, Marcus said. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote you a letter. Frank took the letter and unfolded it. It was written in Marcus's careful handwriting on school paper. Frank read it silently at first, but then he looked up at Marcus. Marcus, would you mind if I read this out loud? No, sir. I'd like that. Frank cleared his throat and began to read. Dear Judge Caprio, 6 months ago I came to your courtroom because I was scared and didn't know how to help my mom. I thought the only way to show love was to give up everything I had. You taught me something different. You taught me that sometimes the most loving thing to do is to accept help from others. You showed me that there are good people in the world who want to help families like mine. But most importantly, you taught me that one person's kindness can change everything. Because you were kind to me, Mrs. Coleman gave me books. Because you were kind to me, Mr. Ricci gave my mom a better job. Because you were kind to me, my school started helping kids who were being bullied. Because you were kind to me, I learned that I want to spend my life being kind to other people. Thank you for showing me that the world is full of good people. Thank you for helping me and my mom. But mostly thank you for teaching me that kindness is the most powerful thing in the world. Your friend, Marcus Rivera. Frank finished reading the letter and looked up at Marcus with tears in his eyes. Marcus, this is the most beautiful letter I have ever received. Thank you. Judge Caprio, I have one more thing to tell you, Marcus said. My teacher asked our class to write about our heroes. I wrote about you. Frank felt overwhelmed with emotion. Marcus, I'm honored. But I think you have it backward. You're my hero. You taught me something important that day 6 months ago. What did I teach you? Frank thought for a moment. You taught me that sometimes justice isn't just about following rules. Sometimes justice is about understanding people's hearts. You taught me that a 12-year-old boy can be braver and more loving than most adults. And you taught me that when we help one person, we end up helping a whole community. As Marcus and Elena prepared to leave, Frank stood up and walked around his desk one more time. He knelt down to Marcus's eye level just like he had done 6 months ago. Marcus, promise me something. Promise me that you'll never forget how special you are. Promise me that you'll keep being kind and brave and generous. The world needs more people like you. Marcus smiled and nodded. I promise, Judge Caprio. After Marcus and Elena left, Frank sat alone in his quiet courtroom. He thought about all the cases he had handled over the years. Most of them were forgotten now, just routine legal matters that had been resolved and filed away. But Marcus Rivera's case was different. It wasn't just a legal case that had been resolved. It was a story that had touched hundreds of people and changed a whole community. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest people can teach the biggest lessons about love, sacrifice, and hope. Frank picked up Marcus's letter and read it again. Then he carefully folded it and put it in his desk drawer, next to the most important papers in his office. He knew that years from now, when he was feeling discouraged about the world, he would take out this letter and remember a 12-year-old boy who showed him what true courage looks like. Outside the courthouse, Marcus and Elena walked hand in hand toward the bus stop. But they were no longer the scared, desperate family who had struggled to survive 6 months ago. They were a family filled with hope, surrounded by a community that cared about them and confident that their future would be bright. Marcus looked up at his mother. "Mama, do you think we'll ever see Judge Caprio again?" Elena smiled. "I hope so, mijo. But even if we don't, we'll never forget what he did for us." "I won't forget either, Mama. And someday when I'm a teacher, I want to help other kids the way Judge Caprio helped me."